January of 2012, 0.03%. Wow. It was done completely intentionally, and it will destroy us. This cannot go on. Now, who is doing this? Who is doing these credit default swaps? And more importantly, who's doing all of these repos and reverse repos? The answer is terrifying. It's basically everyone. Banks are doing this, obviously. Brokerage firms, obviously, as we just went through. Insurance companies. Pension funds, private and union. Remember, interest rates are at 0, people. These pension funds are doing these repos and reverse repos in order to generate interest income. Money market funds. Large corporations. And state and local governments. Repos and reverse repos are today one of the most common financial transactions executed in the world. And they didn't even exist a few years ago. But everybody is doing them now. Why? Because of ZIRP. They have to replace the lost interest income. How much are they doing this? On page 18 now. Banks, as of June 30th, 2011, in your first top box, J.P. Morgan Chase, and note the date here, June 30th, 2011, total assets of J.P. Morgan Chase, $1.8 trillion. That's basically customer deposits. Let's call that customer deposits, $1.8 trillion. Total derivatives exposure, $78 trillion on $1.8 trillion in customer assets. Repos, reverse repos, CDS, et cetera, 78 trillion in exposure. And we know it's that because we can also see a breakout of how much of the stuff is over the counter and how much of it is exchange traded. And the over the counter, meaning the repos and so forth, that's in the high 90% area. They're only doing a tiny, tiny fraction of their derivatives, meaning futures contracts and so forth. Only a tiny percentage of this 78 trillion is on the exchanges. Most of it is what's called over the counter. That's repos and reverse repos and CDS. Okay? So if we divide this out, the leverage of JP Morgan Chase is 43 times. 43 times leverage. And remember what we started with at the very beginning. Do you remember what the total GDP of the United States is? What is it? 15.5 trillion. And we converted that into man hours. And it was 775 billion man hours, and which was 387 million man years. That's 15 trillion. Just JP Morgan, just one bank, has derivatives exposure of $78 trillion. If you want to be an overachiever there at home watching this on YouTube, convert $78 trillion the same way we did at the beginning into man hours and man years. It's one bank. Next, Citibank. Total assets, 1.2 trillion. Total derivatives exposure, 56 trillion. If you divide that out, they're running at 47 times leverage. That's Citi. Next up, Bank of America. Total assets, 1.5 trillion. Total derivatives exposure, 53 trillion. Leverage, 35 times. Oh, Goldman Sachs. This one will make you sob. Total assets of Goldman Sachs, 89 billion. That's customer deposits, okay? They're not a big customer bank in the same sense as Bank of America and JP Morgan and Citi. but they are one of the biggest in terms of derivatives. $48 trillion in derivatives exposure on $89 billion in assets. That's 545 times leverage. And you say, no. How is that? How is that possible? How can that be? How can Goldman Sachs be running at 545 times leverage relative to its assets? And the answer is because Goldman Sachs and the United States government are, for all intents and purposes, the same fiscal entity. And if anybody has any explanation other than that, I would love to hear it. And again, I would just encourage you to look at the people who are populating the United States government, the bureaucracy, the Federal Reserve banks, and look at their CVs. Where did these people come from? They came from Goldman, okay? Again, I don't like the whole conspiracy theory worldview, but sometimes it's real. And when it is real, you have to be brave enough to face it. That's it. And finally, let's look at the top 25 U.S. banks. Top 25 banks in the U.S. together, $8.3 trillion in customer assets. Total derivatives exposure of the top 25 banks, $249 trillion. 30 times leverage. The GDP of the United States is only $15.5 trillion. The GDP of the entire planet is between 65 and 70 trillion. Top 25 banks just in the US, and just the top 25 banks, $249 trillion in derivatives exposure. And so some people out there watching might say, well, Ann, if the system collapses, it'll be a symmetrical collapse. There will be symmetry to it. I'll give you that. I'll give you part of that argument. Even if you give this a 90% haircut, even if you assume that there's 90% symmetry in the collapse of these derivatives markets, you're still looking at $25 trillion. These amounts of money don't even exist. We're into the domain of things that aren't even real anymore. Globally, derivatives exposure is at minimum $1.5 quadrillion. I told you we'd be talking about quadrillions. Okay, what we've been talking about is just the United States. What about Europe? What about China? What about Japan? What about them? Okay, now we're into the quadrillions. Where's your wealth? Remember the list of people that we just went through? Banks, insurance companies, pension funds, on and on and on. This is where your money is. Money market funds, state and local governments. This is where your money is sitting. You need to get out. Because when the system collapses, it will happen so fast, you won't have time to react. You've got to get out. When should you be exiting the system? The answer is now. Computer programs, high frequency trading, HFT, you'll see that, that acronym, also called the algos, which is short for the algorithms. Just computers, completely independently, computer programs trading the markets. Guys, that's all that's left. Computer programs now account for 70% of all completed transactions in the equities and futures markets, and 99.9% of all quotes in the equities and futures markets. The people are gone. The smart people started leaving years ago. There's nobody left. So you look at the volume on the exchanges for stocks and futures and so forth, and well, look at all this volume. Look at how many contracts they traded today, and look how many shares they traded today. It's not real. It's computers trading with each other, in and out in milliseconds. There's no people in there anymore. This is incredibly dangerous. And these statistics come from Nanex. It's just an analytical company that does great work parsing all of this high frequency trading data and information. Market liquidity is totally dependent upon the algorithms now. As you could see, I mean, 70% of all completed transactions and 99.9% of all bids and asks are computer generated. Well, of course the markets are completely dependent upon them. These algos are programmed to stop trading in the event of a black swan market shock. If anything crazy happens, the computers are programmed to step back. What does that mean? That means if anything crazy happens and the algos stop generating bids and offers, since there are no people left in there, the markets are going to go no bid like that. And then good luck getting out of your positions. Oh, it's no problem. I'll call my broker and he'll just put the orders in. What if there's nobody on the other side? You want to sell your shares. There's no bid. There is no bid. What are you going to do? The computers are gone, and that's who you've been trading with for the last several years. Now they're gone. There's no bid. That means your wealth is gone. Solution, open outcry execution. After the collapse, after the war, by all means, you're going to need to rebuild markets. Forward delivery, which are futures markets, and stock markets, it's a great thing. They're a wonderful thing, but they have to be done right with a rule of law. They need to be done open outcry. No more computers. Okay? Open outcry worked until just a few years ago. Just a few years ago. I put my first electronic order in 2006. 2006! Just going on 7 years ago. All of civilization worked just fine with open outcry markets and execution up until just a few years ago. And you're going to make the argument that there's no possible way that we can go back. You have to go back. If you let these computers in, if you're not trading with humans, it's going to destroy itself eventually. Okay, you've got to go back to open outcry, dealing with humans. If you say, well, we want to arbitrage these markets, that's fine. If you want to arbitrage the markets, that's fine. You buy a membership, you go down into the pit, you stand in the pit, and you arb the markets like a man. You don't arb the markets by having some dork write you some computer code to arb the markets for you. You want to arb, man up and do it yourself. Stand in the pit and do it honest. I'm fully in favor of that. God bless you. Do it. Efficiency is good. But we're not going to do this computer crap anymore. Electronic order routing to the pits only. Trades must be executed by a human being with another human being. There are some people who are saying, well, you can do the algos if you just put a time limit on them. I don't buy it because it's still beyond the capacities of human trading. It's still beyond the capacities of human beings, and they will consume themselves eventually. Unfunded liabilities, meaning entitlement debt, welfare, Social Security, Medicare, blah, 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 of the United States government stands today at $222 trillion on a 75-year horizon, meaning the expected average lifespan of a child born today. 222 trillion. This figure assumes a static cost curve in today's dollars and interest rates. Yeah, never mind the fact that health expenditures are increasing at about a 9% annualized rate. No, that's not even priced into any of this. And never mind the fact that we're in a zero interest rate environment. None of that's priced into any of this. This is assuming static prices and continued zero interest rates. The truth is that these costs are growing at an exponential rate, like 9% per year, and interest rates cannot stay at zero and will likely hyperinflate. So this number right here is actually extraordinarily, deceptively low. Critical mass has been reached. It can't be walked back. The system is going to collapse. If you are a person who is planning on being in any way dependent on Social Security or Medicare, you're not going to get it. It's not going to be there. The system is going to collapse long before you ever get there. Someone like me, I just turned 36. Assuming that I live to old age, there is no possible way that I would ever have any of that. There's no possible way, I don't think, that the average 60-year-old today is going to get any of this. The system is going to implode. Even if you are wealthy enough to never need or use entitlements such as Social Security or Medicare, or could always afford to pay cash for any health care you might need, these issues still directly impact you because they are what has destroyed beyond repair the United States, its government, and its economy. So if you're a high net worth individual, you can't just say, oh, well, fiddle-dee-dee, this has nothing to do with me. Yes, it does have to do with you, because these entitlement programs that you have spent your life looking upon as, oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice that the government is giving all of these poor people free things? It is what will destroy all of us, including you. Giving people free things in mathematically impossible paradigms is not charity. Anything that is contrary to reason and truth is a lie that is coming from the pit of hell. Which is why when I see archbishop after archbishop and cardinal after cardinal in the church running their mouths about the need for universal health care, my anger is off the charts. You imbeciles, you idiots, how dare you? Everybody's entitled to the right of universal health care, huh? Really? Where does health care come from? It comes from doctors, and it comes from nurses. Are you honestly so stupid? Are you honestly so poorly educated, Your Excellency, that you actually believe that one human being has the right to the labors of another human being? Boy, I don't know. That sure sounds like slavery to me. Doesn't it sound like slavery to you? How's this going to work? How are you going to provide an infinite quantity to people? How does that work exactly, Excellency? I want to see the math on that. I want to see the logic and the reason behind that. Our Lord Himself is logic and reason. Our Lord Himself is truth. Our Lord Himself is even mathematical truth. And while you, Archbishop and cardinals of the church, are spewing these lies that are contrary to the truth, that are contrary to mathematical truth and to logic and to reason, you are agents of Satan, because Satan is the father of all lies. Archbishop, cardinals of the church, you gentlemen need to pull your heads out of your ass before you destroy all of Western civilization. Now, do it now. Stop trying to rebel against your father. Stop trying to rebel against your Marxist, homosexual seminary professors from the early 1970s. Stop it. You're killing everybody. You are in league with Satan. Stop it. For the love of God. Literally. Solution. Catastrophic, high deductible health insurance only. Low deductible, non-catastrophic health insurance is what has destroyed the entire healthcare market. Why? Because non-catastrophic insurance eventually destroys any market it touches because price point feedback ceases to exist. If you have insurance, you don't ask what anything costs. You just, oh well, the insurance will pay for it. That's why healthcare costs are inflating at a 9% annualized rate, because there is no price point feedback, because of insurance, because of government largesse in the form of these entitlement programs. No, this has to stop. Giving people free crap only destroys civilizations in the long run. All reform plans being bandied about in terms of the federal government and debt and spending and all of this contain no spending cuts. They only contain a decrease in the rate of increase in spending, including the so-called Paul Ryan plan. Ooh, Paul Ryan, he's a Republican and he's going to be the vice president if these elections even happen at all. But oh boy, he's our boy. And the Ryan plan, do you know what the Ryan plan is? Here's the rate of government increase in spending right now. Paul Ryan's plan does this.